Hey guys, tonight we're climbing. Yes, climbing into a village that doesn't just sit on the edge of a cliff. It is the cliff. Imagine dangling hundreds of meters above a misty gorge in Sichuan, China, where the clouds roll beneath your window, and the only neighbors are eagles, goats, and the occasional, very confused drone. This is Atulair Village, a place so remote and precarious that you begin to wonder if the original settlers were adrenaline junkies or just really, really bad at directions. This isn't the kind of village you stumble upon after a wrong turn. It's the kind you look up at from the bottom of a canyon, squint, and say, nope, that's photoshopped. But it's very real, very vertical, and for a long time, the only way in or out involved rope, courage, and a complete disregard for gravity. And just so you're emotionally prepared, you probably wouldn't survive here. Not because of bandits or bears, but because walking home from the market involves a vertical ascent that could leave even a mountain goat saying, I'll pass. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see who's staying up too late tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Let's begin by peering upward, way upward, at the sheer sandstone cliffs of Zhaojue County in Sichuan. From a distance, the village of Atulair looks like a smattering of bird nests pasted onto rock. But these nests are homes. Homes where people have lived for centuries with their backs pressed against rock walls and their futures dangling on twine. The local Yi people, an ethnic minority group with a culture as rich as their courage is endless, settled here long ago, at a time when location meant protection. Perched nearly half a mile above the ground, this village was nearly impossible to raid, and the terrain was a fortress. Practical, questionable, defensible, definitely. And so life grew here. Children were born. Corn was planted. Chickens learned to navigate ledges narrower than your phone. From the inside, these homes are simple but not bleak. Wooden beams, smoke-blackened kitchens, and windows that open to the abyss. Outside, there's the constant whisper of wind and the occasional shriek of someone who stepped just a little too close to the edge. Safety rails? Adorable idea. Atulair isn't just one of those world's most dangerous clickbait destinations. It's a living, breathing, noodle-boiling, goat-wrangling place, where around 70 families made daily life work with nothing more than grit and a few ropes. Now, let's talk about those ropes. Imagine leaving your house and descending 800 meters, nearly half the vertical height of the Burj Khalifa, on a series of woven rope ladders. No harness, no safety nets, just your hands, your feet, and the distant memory of a stable floor. These were the only staircases the villagers had for decades. Made from knotted vines and roughly hewn wood, they clung to the cliffside like limp spaghetti. They swayed in the wind, rotted in the rain, and yet they worked. Sort of. School children would descend every Monday and return the following weekend, often carrying food, fuel, or whatever else they could haul. The trip was so perilous that parents used to say goodbye like it might be the last time. Sometimes it was. Now here's your mainstream geography moment. This region of Sichuan lies within China's Hengduan Mountains, a chaotic mesh of peaks and gorges carved by the mighty Yangtze and its tributaries. It's a land of vertical extremes, where plateaus drop into valleys like someone yanked the terrain upward with a giant hook. But within all this drama lies a quirk. The area gets surprisingly mild winters, thanks to the monsoon-influenced climate. So while you're dangling above a canyon, you're not freezing. Small winds. Back in the village, daily routines happened as they always do. Fires were lit in clay hearths. Corn was ground by hand. Kids were scolded for playing too close to the edge, which, to be fair, was anywhere outside. And here's your fringe tidbit. The villagers believe the cliffs themselves hold spirits. Watchers who protect the village but must be respected. Some elders whisper that the rock face can sense arrogance, and if you climb without humility, it might not let you go back down. Folklore? Probably. But would you risk it? Scientists still argue over exactly how long the village has been inhabited. Some point to archaeological clues that suggest settlement began during the Ming Dynasty. Others argue for older roots, citing ancient trade routes and petroglyphs. One theory even claims it was a spiritual retreat, though no one can quite explain why you'd put your meditation zone where even the wind has anxiety. And yet, for all its impossible angles, Atelier had something magical. Perspective. Not just the literal kind, where the clouds drift beneath your feet, but the mental kind too. Life here wasn't fast, but it was focused. You didn't waste energy on trivia, when every calorie burned meant another climb. People grew old here, slowly, creakily, but surrounded by family. Stories were passed down like heirlooms. And while outsiders saw hardship, the villagers saw home. But hold on to that thought. We're just getting started. Now that you've got your legs dangling over the edge, let's talk about how people actually got down from this place. Spoiler, it wasn't exactly an escalator. For generations, the villagers of Atelier navigated a cliffside descent, so steep and so absurdly perilous, you'd think it was designed by someone who hates knees. The main artery in and out of the village was a series of hand-knotted rope ladders stitched together with wooden slats, local vines, and whatever ancestral defiance ran through the villagers' blood. These weren't playground ropes. They were 800 vertical meters of frayed trust, descending sheer rock like spaghetti on a wall. Some sections tilted at awkward angles. Others dangled loosely with no attachment to the rock at all. And in some places, you weren't climbing down so much as sliding sideways, clinging to grooves with fingertips and boot tips while muttering prayers under your breath. Even villagers who grew up here say the first few times were terrifying. You don't think, one old man reportedly said, you just breathe and hold on. But imagine being a kid, a small, wiggly, chaos-powered child. And still, there they were, little bodies inching down the ropes on school mornings, clutching lunchboxes and notebooks in one hand, the ladder in the other, trying not to think about physics. Some parents tied ropes around their kids' waists as makeshift harnesses. Others just carried the smaller ones like backpacks, while muttering reassurances that sounded a lot like, "Please don't sneeze right now." It was equal parts trust and terror. One fringe practice involved villagers whistling into the wind to check weather conditions before a descent. If the echo came back sharp, it meant a dry rock face. If it was muffled, danger loomed. Pseudoscience? Maybe. But when the drop is over 2,600 feet, you take what you can get. Mainstream geography break. Jiaozhui. County's topography is dominated by steep limestone cliffs and sharp-cut gorges. remnants of ancient tectonic uplift. These cliffs don't slope gradually, they spike upward like the earth tried to shrug off part of China. Combine that with heavy summer rains and landslides, and you have one of the least walkable places on the planet. And that brings us to the daily grocery run. Need rice? Salt? Medicine? You're descending half a mile on a handmade rope ladder, hiking to the market below, which might be another hour away, buying supplies, then climbing back up again with a 50-pound sack on your back. Yes, really. The entire journey could take 5 to 7 hours round trip. And if you forgot something, well, too bad. No one's going back for your chili paste. One elderly woman once said, "We never forget the soy sauce. We forget birthdays sometimes, but never soy sauce." You've got to admire that kind of culinary discipline. And yet, life persisted. For every bruised knuckle or slipped boot, there were hundreds of successful trips. People knew every foothold, every slick patch of moss, every loose knot that needed babying. The cliff ladder wasn't just a route, it was an inherited skill. Kids started watching the climb by age 3. By 8, most had done it once. By 10, they could do it half asleep. Scientists still argue about whether the ladder route evolved organically or whether it was engineered deliberately by the earliest settlers. Some claim the vines and wooden slats represent a deeply coded system of traditional rope work, unique to the Yi people. Others say it's all improvisation, patched together over generations with no grand design, just trial, error, and a lot of swearing. Either way, it's terrifyingly brilliant. Now, let's look at one little-known quirk. During certain holidays, villagers would decorate parts of the ladder with small red banners, a sort of vertical blessing. These cloth charms were said to ward off bad weather and honor ancestors, who, let's be honest, were probably still recovering from their own climbs. Even outsiders who attempted the climb often gave up halfway. Some simply froze, mid-ladder, mid-cliff, unable to go forward or back. Local rescue protocols involve sending down someone smaller and calmer, who would gently encourage the stuck tourist with phrases like, "Just pretend you're a goat." Surprisingly, this worked more often than not. Atuler's fame eventually reached Chinese media, and then international headlines. Photos of the rope ladder began surfacing, grainy at first, then clearer, then viral. People couldn't believe a village like this still existed in the 21st century. Urban viewers especially stared in disbelief. "Why don't they just move?" became the common refrain. The villagers, when asked, had a simple answer: because this is home. Home isn't always comfortable. It's not always easy. But it's where your feet know the floor, even if the floor is actually a rope ladder dangling over nothingness. Still, change was coming. As Atuler's photos circulated, attention mounted. Journalists showed up, as did safety inspectors. And somewhere, in a faraway office, a plan was drawn up that would begin to unravel centuries of vertical life. But that's still to come. For now, just imagine yourself gripping a weather-worn rope, peering down into the blue-green haze of the valley, heart thudding, sweat stinging your eyes, and realizing that for these villagers, this was just Tuesday. Now imagine you're 6 years old, and it's a Monday morning. The sun is just beginning to warm the rock walls. The mist hasn't yet cleared from the valley below, and your tiny backpack is full of books, 2 hard-boiled eggs, and a sliver of last night's cornmeal cake. You strap on your helmet, not for cycling, but for not dying, and prepare to descend the cliff. This was life for the children of a Tuller. Every week, dozens of school-age kids would leave their homes at the top of the cliff and begin the grueling vertical commute to the valley school below. They didn't just climb. They descended with teachers, parents, or older siblings, navigating a bone-rattling descent that would make a professional rock climber nervous. There were no carpool lanes, just cliff-face ladders and a steep footpath threaded with loose rocks and old weather grudges. And yet, every Monday, they went. It wasn't until 2012 that the outside world took serious notice. Photos of children in bright yellow helmets clinging to ladders like cartoon ants stunned the internet. The safety situation was so dire that local authorities eventually provided the helmets and harnesses. Before that, just hope. Lots and lots of hope. One teacher, tasked with escorting a small gaggle of students each week, once said, "I pray more climbing than I do teaching." It's hard to correct someone's multiplication tables when you're dangling over a canyon. Still, the kids adapted. They learned where to place their feet, how to distribute weight, how to pause and breathe when their legs shook. It was like earning a mountaineering certificate, except it started in first grade and came with midterms. And this wasn't just about getting to school. Education represented the only real exit strategy for many of these children. Their parents knew it. Their grandparents knew it. The rope ladder wasn't just a commute. It was a lifeline out of poverty. Here's your mainstream fact. China's poverty alleviation campaign between 2015 and 2020 targeted villages like Atuler with focused investment. Education was a cornerstone of that mission. The government believed, and rightly so, that the best tool against geographic isolation was knowledge. But still, no amount of algebra can change the fact that you're hanging by a thread above a gorge. Every Friday, the kids climbed back up, tired, sometimes sunburned, sometimes bruised, always hungry. They'd shout greetings from mid-ladder. Parents would lean over cliff edges to wave, guiding them with echoing calls. Occasionally, someone would drop a shoe. One little boy lost his lunchbox 3 weeks in a row and became something of a legend. Fringe tidbit. Some children, when especially tired, would nap halfway up. Yes, nap. They'd find a wide enough ledge, wedge themselves against the rock, and doze for 10 minutes. Elders claim it's a tradition going back generations. The mountain nap? Scientists are baffled, mostly because they'd never dream of sleeping with their toes dangling off a cliff. Which brings us to the community's general relationship with heights: desensitization. From birth, these kids were exposed to vertical life. Cribs were placed near open windows. Play areas had no fences. One toddler reportedly took his first steps toward the edge of a platform and was calmly redirected without panic. "If you yell," his mother said, "they fall." So instead, everything in Atuler happened with an eerie calm. No loud warnings, no panicked cries, just quiet control, slow movements, clear eyes. Scientists still argue over how this constant exposure to height affects cognitive development. Some say it increases spatial awareness and agility. Others worry it stunts emotional risk assessment. One study in rural Guizhou province suggests cliff-dwelling kids show enhanced balance and depth perception. But whether that's nature, nurture, or sheer necessity, the debate continues. Back at the school below, Teachers marveled at the students' discipline. They don't complain, one said. They're used to hardship. If they can survive the ladder, they can survive anything. Indeed, these children carried a kind of quiet grit. No fancy pens, no iPads, just notebooks wrapped in plastic to protect against rain, and a collective determination to learn. And they did learn. Test scores improved. Attendance, once abysmal due to weather and injury, rose steadily. Even after climbing for hours, the kids would sit down and recite Chinese characters, solve fractions, and draw stick figures that sometimes looked suspiciously like their cliffside homes. Tourists began arriving soon after the story broke. Some came to gawk, others to help. A few tried the descent and came back up white-faced and trembling. One overconfident foreigner insisted on climbing without a helmet for the authentic experience. He made it down, but then refused to speak for the rest of the day. Apparently, his authentic experience involved crying behind a bush. Local jokes developed around this. What do you call a tourist without a helmet? An offering. Still, the villagers welcomed outsiders with warmth. They were proud of their children, proud of their ladders, proud of their history, even if their thighs were constantly sore. The government, however, began to take a harder look. News reports drew criticism. Safety officials arrived. Helicopters buzzed. Someone high up made a phone call. The rope ladders were about to meet their match, but before we get to that, just sit for a moment, mentally, on a wooden ledge. Picture a row of tiny shoes lined up outside a doorway carved into rock. Hear the giggles of a child who just nailed their spelling quiz. Smell the charcoal smoke from dinner fires, mingling with the scent of crushed herbs drying in the sun. This was school life in the sky. Equal parts risk, routine, and resilience. You've met the kids. You've gripped the ladder. Now, let's talk about what it actually feels like to live at over 4,600 feet above sea level, where your backyard is a vertical drop and your nearest convenience store requires a mountaineering permit. The elevation in Atule, your village, isn't Himalayan, but it's high enough to mess with your lungs if you're not used to it. For locals, though, it's just Tuesday. They walk uphill like it's flat ground, carrying sacks of corn or buckets of water with the kind of casual balance that would make a yoga instructor weep. But altitude doesn't just affect lungs. It affects everything. Water boils differently. Sleep is lighter. Babies cry a little more at night. And elders squint longer at the horizon, trying to read the wind. And the goats? Oh yes, there are goats. Every cliff village needs its livestock, and Atuler has developed what might be the most agile goats on Earth. These aren't your average fence-jumping farm types. These are four-legged free climbers. They scale narrow ledges, hop between rock shelves, and stare back at you like you're the one being reckless. One visitor once joked, "The goats here don't eat grass. They judge your footwear." It's not far from the truth. These animals have evolved alongside their human companions, learning to navigate the terrain with uncanny confidence. Sometimes they're even used to haul supplies up and down. Little bells around their necks, jingling softly as they hop past vertical death drops. You learn to trust the goats before you trust your own footing. And let's not forget the weather. Up here, clouds come up from the valley. Mornings are often veiled in thick fog that swirls between the houses like it's searching for something. Rain doesn't just fall, it seeps, soaking through clothes and into the bones. And the wind, it's a permanent house guest, not violent, but always present. It whistles through the cracks in the wood, rustles the dry corn hanging from beams, and whispers ancient lullabies no one remembers the words to. Mainstream geography break. Atule-Air lies within the Liangshan Yi Autonomous Prefecture, one of China's most rugged and mountainous administrative regions. The terrain here is part of the greater Hengduan Range, where the Qinghai-Tibet Plateau crashes into the Yunnan-Guizhou Plateau like tectonic bumper cars. The result? Chaos. Gorgeous, misty, wildly inconvenient chaos. And yet, life continues. Homes in the village are built with timber and stone, sourced either from nearby forest groves or manually carried up from the valley over several days. Each house clings to a ledge or platform, often using stilts to find level footing. Some are nestled directly into the rock wall, with beams embedded in cracks like dental floss in a canyon. They're compact, but cleverly designed. Living spaces double as storage. Lofts are carved into ceilings. Chickens sometimes roost indoors to avoid hawks. Windows are scarce, mostly small and shuttered tight against the wind. Though every home has a lookout point, some rickety porch or flat rooftop where you can step outside and inhale clouds. Fringe detail? Locals often hang dried chili peppers in patterns above their doors, not just for cooking, but to scare away lazy spirits. The lazier the ghost, the more intimidating the chilly configuration. One household reportedly had a pepper curtain, so intricate that it became a tourist attraction. Locals dubbed it the spicy firewall. And then there's the clothing. Living up here requires dressing in layers. Traditional Yi garments include woolen tunics, bright woven sashes, and elaborate headscarves, practical, colorful, and deeply symbolic, eh? Each pattern tells a story. Some lines signify river paths. Dots mark family ancestry. And the colors? Blue is for the sky, red for good harvest, yellow for long life, and black for, well, probably just practicality. It's hard to keep whites white when your ceiling leaks mist. Scientists still argue about whether the isolation of a tulir has helped or hindered cultural preservation. On one hand, the village remained untouched by outside influences for decades. On the other, it lacked access to broader education, healthcare, and economic opportunities. Some say the cliffs protected the Yi way of life. Others say it caged it. But one thing is clear. People here didn't live by default. They lived by decision. Every log split, every meal cooked, every errand run required intent. You chose to fetch water. You chose to raise pigs. You chose to live where your floorboards echoed the breeze. There's an odd peace that comes with that. Most evenings, the village would fall silent by dusk. Fires flickered behind wooden slats. Shadows danced on sandstone. Children huddled under quilts while parents told stories, some true, some suspiciously exaggerated. One tale involved a grandmother who wrestled a hawk off her goat using only a broom and a prayer. No one quite believes it, but everyone enjoys pretending they do. In winter, the cold comes fast. There's no central heating, just layers, coals, and proximity. Families gather tight. Meals get simpler. Fermented vegetables, corn cakes, boiled roots, hot broth passed around like gossip. And above it all, the stars. The altitude gives you a front row seat to the galaxy. Nights are inky black, unpolluted by city glow. You can trace constellations while sipping tea, your breath steaming like dragon smoke. If you're lucky, The Milky Way drapes itself across the sky like a river of ghost lights. It's beautiful. It's brutal. It's home. And while most of us would last about 4 hours before begging for Wi-Fi and a flush toilet, the people of Atulair had something we lost somewhere along the way: rhythm, a connection to terrain, to weather, to each other. A life measured not in likes or deadlines, but in footsteps and firewood. But the outside world was stirring. And when news reached the government that school kids were still rappelling to class like budget Spider-Men, the era of untouched cliff life was about to, well, get a safety inspection. Let's peek inside one of those wooden homes again. Only this time, don't look at the walls. Look at what's holding them up. In Atulair, many of the cliffside houses aren't technically on land. They're hooked into it. These dwellings cling to the side of the rock like stubborn barnacles, perched on beams driven into narrow natural ledges, or braced against vertical walls using a combination of wedged stone, handmade rope, and, somewhat unsettlingly, faith. Think of it as extreme carpentry meets survivalist engineering. These aren't flimsy treehouses either. They're proper homes, full kitchens, sleeping lofts, small altars, grain storage bins, and all the family squabbles you'd expect in 300 square feet. But instead of a garden or driveway, many houses have a few feet of open air before the cliff drops off into clouds and vultures. The architecture is hyper-local and hyper-functional. Timber is harvested from steep forests several hours away and carried up by humans or goats. Every plank is cut to match irregular rock faces. Nails are rare. Most joints are made with pegs, notches, and sheer ingenuity. Inside, the homes are dark, cozy, and built to trap warmth. Fireplaces are central. Soot blackens the ceilings. Windows are small, not because villagers don't like views, because they like not freezing in winter. Fringe tidbit. Some homes use counterweights in the floor. Yes, weights. Old stones, clay jars, or water containers placed at the back of the house to balance it against the pull of gravity. The theory is that shifting the mass slightly inward helps stabilize the frame during heavy winds or seismic tremors. Scientists are still arguing about whether this does anything, but villagers swear by it. One elder even jokes, "You don't sleep on the cliff. You teach the cliff how to sleep under you." The villagers also reinforce homes with plant matter, moss, woven reeds, and sometimes even old textiles, stuffed into crevices to seal gaps and dampen echoes. Every surface is multifunctional. Every beam has a story. If a door frame creaks too much, it's not replaced. It's warned. Here's your mainstream fact. This architectural style falls into a broader tradition of Daojiaolu, or stilted houses, seen across southern China. Typically found along riverbanks and cliffs, these homes are raised to avoid floods or unstable land. What makes Atulair different is the extremity. Most Daojiaolu have at least some flat ground beneath them. Here, not so much. And yet, they stand. Some have survived earthquakes. Others have outlasted monsoons. All have weathered decades of wear and erosion. The cliff face itself acts as a windbreak, while the deep overhangs and thatched eaves prevent rain from pooling. It's low-tech, but wildly effective. Of course, the biggest risk isn't weather, it's human error. Maintenance is constant. Every season, villagers inspect their homes from the outside. Yes, the outside. That means leaning over the edge with ropes, sticks, and terrifyingly casual grace to check beam integrity, patch holes, or reties supporting ropes. It's home improvement on hard mode. There's also a cliff-wide etiquette system. You never build above someone else's roof. Why? Because when your toilet is a bucket, gravity becomes a deeply personal issue. Oh, right. The toilet situation. Most homes have makeshift outhouses or chamber pots. Waste is sometimes composted, sometimes flung, occasionally carried down for disposal. One villager said, "You learn to be precise." That's comforting. But even with all this effort, the homes feel lived in. Children hang their drawings on wooden beams. Dried herbs dangle from door frames. Radios crackle with distant news. Someone's always singing, softly, like the cliff might listen. And the rooftops? Flat, walkable, sometimes terrifying, but also functional. That's where laundry dries, corn gets husked, and people stare at the sky while chewing sunflower seeds and talking about whether this year's rain smells different from last year's. It's meditation, minus the yoga mat. One visitor once asked, "Aren't you afraid?" The homeowner simply shrugged. "Of what? I know every nail in this floor." And that's it, really. In a Tuller, fear isn't the absence of danger. It's the absence of familiarity. The villagers know their danger, intimately, and that makes it livable. Scientists still argue about whether cliff living is sustainable long term. Environmentalists point to erosion, the risks of rockfall, and the challenge of delivering basic services. Cultural anthropologists counter with the village's remarkable resilience, arguing that forced relocation could erase a way of life more thoroughly than any landslide. And yet, the question hangs in the air, literally. What happens when the ropes fray, the beams rot, or the next generation decides they've had enough of life at a 60-degree angle? That's not just a practical concern, it's emotional. One villager said, "If we leave the cliff, do we leave our ancestors behind?" There's a deep belief here that the homes are part of the lineage, built by great-grandparents, modified by grandparents, lived in by multiple generations simultaneously. It's not a house, it's a family tree nailed into the mountain. So when outsiders talk about tearing them down, the suggestion isn't just met with skepticism, it's met with silence. And silence on the cliff is louder than shouting anywhere else. Now picture this. You're lying on a wooden bed, wind whistling past the single-pane window. Your house groans gently in the dark, like it's breathing with you. You can hear your neighbor snoring through the walls. Somewhere down the cliff, a goat sneezes. And despite everything, you feel oddly safe. Let's zoom out now. Not far, just a little. Far enough to see the hanging houses from a cliffside angle. Far enough to notice something truly absurd. They're farming. On this. Yes. High above the valley floor, on slanted platforms bolted to rock and carved into terraces that would make an Inca nervous. The villagers of Atulaye are growing corn, chili peppers, beans, and occasionally raising pigs. Because if you're going to defy physics, you might as well do it with a hoe in one hand and a basket of seedlings in the other. They call it sky farming. You might call it impossible, but it works. Somehow. Each family maintains a patchwork of tiny terraces, some so narrow you'd have to stand sideways to sow a row. Others are a bit broader, shaped like long, shallow steps carved directly into the slope. Retaining walls made from hand-stacked stones hold the dirt in place. Wooden barriers, woven reed fences, and the occasional chicken help keep things from tumbling into the void. The soil isn't exactly generous. It's rocky, dry, and prone to vanishing with the next storm. But the villagers enrich it with compost, ash, and animal droppings. Occasionally, if it's been a good harvest season, someone might even sneak in a bit of goat manure, carefully aged and, we'll say, aromatic. Water? That's trickier. There's no plumbing system. Rainwater is caught in ceramic basins, and some families carry buckets from springs further down the mountain. Others rig bamboo pipes that snake precariously along the rock face, delivering just enough trickle to keep the plants alive. If it's been a dry month, everyone's garden wilts together, and no one dares waste a drop. Mainstream geography moment. Terraced farming has been practiced in China for over 2,000 years, especially in mountainous regions like Yunnan, Guizhou, and Guangxi. But what makes Atelier different is that the terraces are not part of large-scale systems. They're improvised, individualized, and often perched at dangerous angles on unstable rock. And still, they produce. Corn is the main staple. Hardy, forgiving, and able to grow, even when the earth doesn't feel like cooperating. Peppers come next, fiery red ones that sting your eyes just by being nearby. Beans and greens are added when there's space. And pigs are kept in little wooden pens that are tied down like ship cargo. One pig reportedly broke loose during a storm and lived wild on the cliff for 2 months, before returning home fatter and angrier. Local legend now calls it the suspended swine. You'll often see villagers crouched over their microplots, barefoot or in thin plastic slippers, singing softly while plucking weeds. Some wear wide-brimmed straw hats that catch the sun. Others wear the same headscarves they sleep in. Everyone works at the same angle, slightly hunched, slightly leaning uphill, forever adjusting their balance like dancers on a seesaw. Fringe tidbit? Some believe planting at high elevation changes the taste of crops. The corn has more spirit, one grandmother says, and the peppers make you dream faster. There's no science on that, yet. But it's safe to say cliff-grown food doesn't taste like anything from a grocery store. Life in these hanging gardens isn't just about survival. It's rhythm. Wake early. Check the goats. Haul water. Tend the beans. Whisper to the corn. Sweep the rock. Make lunch. Check again. Atelier might not have Wi-Fi, but it absolutely has notifications, mostly in the form of weather, goats, and things that go crack when the wind picks up. And through it all, children play. You'll see them chasing chickens across platforms, tumbling down embankments, and inventing complicated games involving rocks, string, and the occasional terrified beetle. No screens, no fences, just gravity and imagination. It's half playground, half survival training. Tourists who make the journey often gasp when they see the farms. Why not buy food from the valley, they ask. Well, imagine descending 800 meters for a cabbage, then hauling it back up. Now imagine doing that every time you want dinner. Suddenly, growing chili on a ledge with a bucket of goat water seems downright reasonable. Scientists still argue whether such small-scale cliffside farming is ecologically viable in the long term. Some suggest that soil erosion will eventually make these gardens impossible. Others argue that the traditional techniques used here, like stone walling, mulch layering, and windbreak planting, are incredibly sustainable and deserve more study. One thing is certain. It's not farming despite the cliff. It's farming because of it. The terrain doesn't hinder. its shapes. Of course, there are risks. Heavy rains can turn a productive garden into a muddy landslide in minutes. Strong winds can unclip entire baskets of vegetables. Wild animals sometimes wander too close. And once in a while, a goat steps where it shouldn't. Everyone in a Tulare has a story that starts with, and then the pig got loose. But they persist, because this is how it's always been, and not out of stubbornness, out of knowledge. Passed down, honed, adapted. The cliff teaches, and the villagers learn. In the evenings, the gardens glow golden in the low light. Corn husks rustle. Pepper strings hang like lanterns. The air smells of smoke, soil, and whatever's stewing in the communal pot. And when night falls, stars blink down on these tiny fields like a celestial audience. You can almost hear them applauding. So next time you get annoyed that your basil plant died on the balcony, remember, there's a woman somewhere in Sichuan, 4,600 feet up, casually growing dinner on a ledge the size of a skateboard. She'd probably pat your head, laugh, and offer you a pepper. Farming, yes. Goat herding, definitely. But there's one aspect of life on the cliff that even locals speak about in a lower voice: the business of death. When someone in Atulare passes away, there is no straight path to the cemetery. There's no road, no driveway, no hearse rolling up with quiet dignity. Just the cliff. The same vertical drop that shaped their life now becomes the final stretch of their journey. Funerals here are not just emotional, they're logistically ridiculous. Traditionally, the Yi people of the region believe in honoring the dead by returning them to the earth. But when the earth is mostly vertical rock and goats, this requires improvisation. Most burials happen down the cliff, on narrow outcrops selected generations ago as family plots. To get there, relatives carry the deceased in handmade stretchers along dangerous paths, sometimes even using the very rope ladders they once used to go to school. Let that settle in. The funeral procession in a Tulare is essentially a team of mourners rappelling down the mountain while holding a body wrapped in cloth, navigating ledges barely wide enough for 1 foot. It's part ritual, part rock, climbing, part whispered prayer that the bamboo poles don't snap. The ceremony itself is simple but intense. Prayers are chanted in the Yi dialect. Offerings of food, coins, and sometimes a favorite object are placed beside the body. A local elder will burn pine branches to cleanse the space, sending smoke up toward the home the person left behind. Chickens are often sacrificed, not in some horror movie way, but as a symbolic guide for the soul. A bird to lead the way through the cliff fog. Mainstream fact drop. Among the Yi, funerals aren't always immediate. Sometimes the body is preserved for days or weeks until the right omens align, like favorable weather or a safe climbing window. In a region where mist can blind you midday and rain turns paths to mud, timing a burial is about both belief and survival. Fringe detail? There's an old superstition in the village that the cliff tests the soul during descent. If the ropes creak too loudly or a stone falls while carrying the body, it's seen as the deceased resisting the transition, or worse, as an ancestor expressing disapproval. In one case, a funeral was paused for 2 hours because a chicken wouldn't stop crowing. The elder insisted on waiting until the warning bird went quiet. No one argued. But what about graves? They're not marked with headstones in the Western sense. Instead, The villagers use carved wooden tablets, sometimes painted, often tied to nearby trees with rope. Over time, weather erases the paint, the wood fades, and the grave becomes just another curve in the cliff's story. It's poetic and a little eerie. You can be walking to tend a pepper patch and realize you're stepping past 3 generations of family, resting in ledges above and below. And yes, some people ask to be buried closer to the homes. Elders might claim a particular boulder or shelf as their future spot. One woman in her 90s once joked that she wanted her grave close enough to throw slippers at the goats. And so, a small plot was cleared beside her corn garden, just wide enough for a body, a bouquet, and a view. Scientists still argue over how to document death practices in remote villages without disrupting or commodifying them. Some anthropologists push for more recordings and interviews, fearing the traditions will vanish. Others warn against intrusion, suggesting that such practices lose meaning when explained for outsiders. As always, culture isn't a museum. It breathes. And sometimes, it prefers to breathe privately. But even here, change is creeping in. In recent years, more villagers have considered cremation, not out of preference, but practicality. As elders pass and the younger generation moves to cities, there's less manpower for full funeral climbs. Government programs have also nudged communities toward more sanitized practices. Still, for most, the idea of separating death from the mountain feels wrong. Because here, death is not a separate event. It's a continuation. You're born on the cliff. You learn to climb, to farm, to listen to the wind. You age beside your goats, watch your children rope themselves into school, and when it's time, you descend one last time, gently, purposefully. It's hard to imagine a city funeral offering that kind of symmetry. Now, take a second to picture it. A line of villagers in dark blue woven coats, moving slowly down the ladder in silence. No cries, no speeches, just the creak of rope, the rhythm of shared grief, and the mountain itself watching in quiet respect. A final climb, not up, but down. And when the wind shifts, carrying the scent of burning pine and old earth, someone will say, "She's home now. By now you've climbed, you've farmed, you've even attended a cliffside funeral." So let's address one of the most unexpected chapters in Atulayer's story: how baskets, zip lines, and good old-fashioned human grit became the village's Amazon prime. Because when there are no roads, and your nearest neighbor is an eagle, you get creative. Atulayer didn't just survive by growing their own food. Some goods, oil, salt, tools, medicine, had to be brought up. And no one's hiking 800 meters just to carry a bag of rice unless they're truly desperate or wildly optimistic. So, the villagers built an informal logistics network. 1 part pulley system, 1 part jungle gym, and 1 part blind faith. The MVP of this system? Baskets. Big, woven, handcrafted baskets that could be tied to ropes and slid across homemade zip lines strung between cliffs, trees, or even houses. Yes, Atulayer had zip lines. Not the fun kind where you scream over a forest canopy in a helmet and cargo shorts. These were utility lines made of wire or rope, sometimes reinforced with bamboo. A child might ride down one in a harness. A sack of potatoes might come up. A chicken might panic halfway through and flap uselessly until someone reels it in. If the terrain didn't allow a full line, villagers would rig partial systems, ropes anchored to trees, with baskets that were manually pulled up via pulleys or sheer determination. These baskets carried everything: supplies, tools, babies, yes, babies. And once, according to legend, a cat that refused to come back home and had to be lured into the basket with dried fish. Mainstream fact: across remote parts of China, especially Yunnan, Sichuan, and Guizhou, ropeway systems like this have existed for centuries. They're often referred to as zip bridges or sky roads, and while many have been replaced by roads or cable cars, they were once crucial lifelines between mountain communities. Atulair's version was the homemade edition. No government blueprints, just decades of tinkering, repairing, replacing, and hoping the knots held. And it wasn't just the delivery method that stood out. It was the delivery culture. Every home participated. If a neighbor received a bundle of flour, they might yell across the gorge, offering a scoop. If someone broke a tool, another family might send down a replacement via basket, sometimes with a handwritten note or a smiley face carved into a potato. Fringe detail? There was a stretch of time when two families, living across a wide ravine, used a pulley basket to play checkers. One would send the board mid-game, the other would make their move, then send it back. The game took 2 weeks. No one remembers who won, but everyone agrees it was tense. Then there were the ghost deliveries. Some nights, villagers would wake up to find baskets tied to their posts, containing nothing but a note, a flower, or a carved charm. No one claimed credit. No one saw who sent them. They were just there. Some say it was a secret admirer tradition. Others think it was just bored teens being poetic. A few elders insisted it was the mountain spirits keeping score. Scientists still argue about the psychological effects of these delivery systems. Some believe they fostered a stronger sense of interdependence and trust. Others worry the lack of formal infrastructure bred an over-reliance on improvisation. But one researcher who visited Atulair said it best: "The village works like a body. Every house is an organ. The ropes are its veins." Still, the system wasn't perfect. Baskets sometimes snapped, pulleys jammed. There were reports of monkeys hijacking the occasional delivery, once stealing a whole string of dried sausages and disappearing into the mist like a culinary ninja. Wind could knock a package off course. One unlucky pair of boots reportedly spent 4 days stuck in a tree. But the villagers adapted. They added weights to stabilize light loads. They timed deliveries around weather. Kids were trained early to tie basket knots, a specific technique that keeps parcels balanced no matter how hard they swing. And of course, some items couldn't be basketed. You still had to make the climb for livestock, lumber, or anything fragile enough to break when a goat sneezes at it. Enter the foot couriers. These were mostly older teens or spry uncles who volunteered or were volunteered to make the trip down and back. They became legends in their own right. One man was known for carrying a 20-kilogram bag of flour on his back while singing. Another once made the full descent, bought medicine for his mother, and climbed back up during a thunderstorm, barefoot. If you ever doubted human endurance, Atulair would change your mind in a heartbeat. But eventually, the zip lines and baskets weren't enough. As tourism crept in and the need for emergency services grew clearer, officials realized a modern solution was inevitable. One proposal suggested a motorized pulley system. Another imagined drone delivery. Yes, actual drones. But villagers shrugged. "We already have birds," one laughed. Yet all of this, baskets, goats, checkers games, was still part of a larger truth. This village did not wait for the world to solve its problems. It rigged, tied, pulled, and whispered its way toward solutions that made sense in the now. So the next time your online order is late and you feel your blood pressure rising, remember that somewhere in Sichuan, a pig once got delivered in a basket, upside down, in the rain, and everyone was fine. Mostly. Eventually, the cliff whispered its stories one too many times, and the rest of China finally listened. The photos of school kids climbing those hand-knotted ladders had made headlines. The tourism buzz had brought curious outsiders and uncomfortable questions. And somewhere, in a glossy government office with a view of zero cliffs, a decision was made. Operation Rescue the Sky Village. The initial plan? Relocation. Move the villagers into newly built apartments in a nearby town, connect them with healthcare and jobs, and perhaps most controversially, offer free Wi-Fi. Sounds generous, right? But the villagers had one question. Will the view be the same? Spoiler, it wouldn't. Relocation began with warm promises and cold logistics. A row of modern apartments was constructed about 70 kilometers away, equipped with elevators, running water, polished floors, and walls that didn't creak in the wind. A dream to many, but to Atuler's villagers, it felt sterile, unrooted, the kind of place where ancestors couldn't hear your footsteps. Still, some moved. Young families, particularly, saw the appeal. Better schools, safer roads, medical clinics within walking distance instead of climbing distance. A family with 3 kids joked that they were finally able to eat dinner without tying down the soup bowl. The government even provided transition stipends, small sums to help with food, furniture, and job training. But adapting wasn't just about furniture. It was about pace. City life, even in a small town, was fast. Supermarkets, traffic lights, paperwork, screens everywhere. People talking, but not listening. No one pausing to watch the fog roll in. No goats. Fringe fact: one family insisted on bringing their goats with them. When told the apartment balcony was no place for livestock, they built a miniature goat pen on the rooftop. Neighbors weren't thrilled, but the goats seemed surprisingly comfortable with city noise. Mainstream geography reminder: this relocation wasn't unique to Atuler. From 2012 to 2020, over 9 million people across China were resettled as part of the National Poverty Alleviation Campaign. The goal was noble: improve infrastructure and access to services. But critics questioned whether uprooting people was always the right approach. In Atuler's case, the dilemma was thorny. The government faced mounting pressure over safety and education, and rightly so. But forcing people off land they'd lived on for generations felt wrong. So they compromised. Instead of just moving people away, they decided to move technology in. Enter the steel ladder. Built in 2016, the 556-step galvanized steel staircase was bolted into the cliffside, replacing the tangle of hand-knotted ropes with something shinier and much more leg-friendly. From a distance, it looks like a spine, curving up the rock wall in switchback segments, clinging to ledges and threading through crevices. Up close, it's brutal. The steps are narrow, the incline relentless. The climb takes 2 hours on a good day, 3 on a windy one, and infinite if you've skipped breakfast. But it changed everything. Children could reach school without gambling their lives. Elderly villagers could descend with walking sticks. Deliveries became faster, safer, and somewhat less goat dependent. Emergency aid could now reach the village in minutes rather than hours. One older man said, "We climbed like birds before. Now we walk like people." But not everyone was thrilled. Some villagers missed the rope ladder, missed its quiet sway, missed the way it made you feel every inch of the journey. "The steel is cold," one woman said. "It doesn't know our names." Still, the staircase had one unexpected side effect. Tourism exploded. Suddenly, urbanites were flooding in, eager to do the climb, post selfies with wind-blown hair, and caption photos with things like "vertical vibes only." Local families began offering homestays. One house turned part of its living room into a snack shop. A girl started selling bottled water halfway up the climb at premium cliffside prices. Scientists still argue over whether this kind of tourism is exploitative or empowering. Does it bring awareness and income, or does it turn tradition into spectacle? Anthropologists worry about cultural dilution. Economists talk about opportunity. The villagers mostly talk about foot traffic. And yes, the government kept investing. Solar panels appeared, internet towers sprouted, a small health outpost opened on the lower slope. Even the goats got upgraded harnesses. But here's the twist. Not everyone stayed moved. Some families who relocated into the new city apartments began drifting back. Not in protest, just in quiet longing. They returned for holidays, then weekends, then seasons, and eventually, some stayed. Why? Because the city gave them lights, but the cliff gave them rhythm. In a Tulare, the wind still meant something. The smell of corn husks still meant it was harvest time. And when a roof creaked at night, it wasn't unsettling. It was home talking. So now, the village exists in two parts. One in the city, clean and tiled. The other, halfway up a cliff, still stubbornly alive. There are fewer families now, fewer children running along the ledges. But still, smoke rises from hearths, goats bleat from pens, and somewhere up in the mist, a woman unrolls a bundle of chili peppers to dry in the sun. The cliff has not been abandoned. It's just adjusting. Steel may not sway like rope, but it trembles in your calves just the same. With the rope ladders retired, mostly, the villagers now faced a new daily ordeal. The 556-step steel staircase. It wasn't carved into the mountain as much as it was bolted on. An angular, metallic zigzag that looked like someone tried to staple modernity to geology. From a drone's eye view, it's mesmerizing. The stairs slice up the cliff like a zipper, turning at every available ledge, clinging to the rock like it's afraid to let go. From the bottom, however, it's less charming. More like a physical dare. A cardio workout disguised as infrastructure. Let's be clear. Climbing it is no joke. Even fit hikers admit to stopping multiple times. A sign at the base advises pacing, hydration, and respecting your limits. Locals ignore the sign. One woman in her 70s climbs it twice a week with a basket of green onions strapped to her back. When asked how, she simply replies, "You climb until you're at the top. Then you stop climbing." It's hard to argue with logic that simple. Atuleor's steel ladder is a marvel of both engineering and community resilience. Installed over several months by specialized crews dangling from ropes, it was a logistical nightmare. Everything had to be hauled up manually. Steel beams, bolts, welding gear, drinking water. Workers camped in tents halfway up the rock face. living like vertical nomads. Mainstream geography moment. The ladder was a rare example of high-altitude infrastructure built without road access. The terrain was too steep for trucks or cranes, and helicopters were deemed too risky due to unpredictable updrafts. So, human hands did the job. Hundreds of them. Today, the steel ladder is part trail, part monument. Tourists take selfies every 20 steps. Locals, less impressed, use it to haul everything from firewood to wedding cakes. Yes, someone once carried an entire frosted cake up the stairs in July. It made it, barely. Fringe fact: a few months after the ladder was finished, a group of amateur athletes from Chengdu held an unofficial cliff marathon, racing from the valley floor to the top. The winner finished in just under 40 minutes. He then reportedly collapsed under a tree and whispered, "I am one with the goats now." But the ladder wasn't just about convenience. It changed the rhythm of life. Suddenly, school kids could go to class and return the same day. Elderly villagers could visit doctors in town and still make it home by dinner. Goods moved faster. Emergencies were less terrifying. And visitors multiplied. At first, the villagers were wary. Outsiders meant noise, selfie sticks, strangers pointing at their chili strings. But tourism brought money, and money brought choices. Some families opened snack stalls along the route, selling bottled water, noodles, or the occasional fried tofu cube to climbers who looked like they regretted everything. And the ladder brought a subtle shift in perspective. You no longer needed to live full-time on the cliff. You could go down for work and be back by sunset. People started talking about jobs in the valley, about studying in nearby cities, about moving between worlds, rather than choosing just one. But not everyone adapted the same way. Some elders refused to use the ladder, calling it soulless or loud. They missed the ropes, the quiet sway, the ritual of old danger. One man said the steel felt too certain, that it robbed the mountain of mystery. Others simply found it too tiring. Rope climbing uses your arms. Stairs punish your knees. Scientists still argue whether this shift counts as modernization or compromise. Infrastructure experts call it a success story. Cultural anthropologists worry about erosion, not just of land, but of identity. One researcher noted that Atulir's biggest threat might not be gravity anymore. It might be homogenization. Still, there's no denying the steel ladder saved lives and made new ones possible. A woman named Namu, who once climbed down to give birth in the town hospital, was able to walk back up with her baby 2 weeks later. "I counted every step," she said. "My son was asleep the whole way." That's the thing about Atulir. No matter what changes, steel or rope, goats or buses, the village absorbs it into its rhythm, slowly, deliberately, like the cliff itself is thinking it over before giving its approval. Now, picture this. You're halfway up the ladder. Below you, mist curls in the valley like milk and tea. Above you, houses cling to the sky. Your legs ache, your lungs burn, but the wind carries the scent of wood smoke and pepper oil. Somewhere, someone is laughing. A chicken clucks near a rooftop. A child waves from a balcony. And suddenly, the climb doesn't feel like a punishment. It feels like a path. One step at a time. 2,556 times. And when you reach the top, someone might offer you tea or ask you to help carry a goat. So, You've climbed the steel ladder. Your calves are shot. Your lungs feel like steamed dumplings. You've earned your spot in the village, just in time to be greeted by a tourist group arguing over where to take the best Instagram photo. Yes, they've arrived. Tourists, bloggers, drone pilots, fitness influencers, all descending, ironically, from the world below to visit the world above. What was once a secret smudge on a satellite map is now a viral destination. Atulaur became famous without trying. The cliff was too dramatic, the lifestyle too impossible, and the kids too photogenic in their safety helmets. Add a newly built steel ladder and a few viral news features, and suddenly everyone wanted to see the cliff village for themselves. And they came, in hiking boots and brand new North Face jackets, with tripods, hiking poles, and a level of breathlessness that made the villagers concerned. "Are they okay?" one elder asked the guide. "They just started climbing." At first, it was awkward. Tourists wandered into courtyards uninvited, leaned over ledges to get panoramic shots, and loudly asked if the houses had bathrooms. Some do, sort of. One woman, horrified by the presence of chickens indoors, offered to donate a coop. She was gently told that the chickens lived there by choice. But the villagers adapted, slowly. Some opened tea stalls, others offered homestays. A few became informal guides, leading groups to viewpoints or explaining the mysteries of cliff farming. And while a few elders muttered about noisy drones scaring their goats, even they began charging a small filming fee. Because if a guy in a bucket hat wants to photograph your laundry line, he should at least help pay for soap. Mainstream fact: tourism now contributes significantly to Atulaur's economy. In a region once categorized as impoverished by national standards, homestay income, hiking tours, and food sales have given villagers new income streams without abandoning the cliff. But it's a balancing act. Fringe tidbit: one local started offering spiritual cliff walks for urbanites, quiet guided hikes up the staircase, accompanied by breathing exercises and traditional yi chants. It became weirdly popular with stressed out city workers. Some claimed the thin air helped them see their inboxes differently. One man quit his tech job mid-hike. Still, not all tourism is welcome. Some visitors arrive expecting a theme park, not a living village. They ask intrusive questions, treat homes like exhibits, and fumble over cultural customs like bowls in a porcelain noodle shop. One woman asked if the children were actors. Another was confused about why goats weren't wearing sweaters. And then, of course, there are the vloggers. They arrive with gimbals and dramatic voiceovers, often exaggerating the danger. "I risked my life to climb the death stairs of Atulaur," one YouTuber shrieked, right before being overtaken on the stairs by an elderly farmer carrying a watermelon and 3 live ducks. Scientists and sociologists have taken note. Some argue that this tourism is commodifying hardship. Others believe it's preserving a disappearing lifestyle by making it economically viable. The villagers? They mostly just hope the tourists don't fall off anything. One family now runs a pop-up noodle stand halfway up the stairs. It has 1 table, 2 chairs, and a laminated menu that includes victory soup and climber's tea. It's wildly overpriced, but when you're 1,200 steps into a vertical climb, $4 for a cup of warm broth sounds like a bargain. Tourism has also brought unintended perks. Medical clinics are better stocked. Roads near the base of the cliff have improved. Mobile signal is stronger. A few kids now dream of becoming tour guides or translators. One teenager started learning English by practicing with hikers, using phrases like "no touch goat" and "selfie okay." But there's tension too. More foot traffic means more erosion. Drone flights scare livestock, and the village is slowly being transformed from a quiet stronghold into a photo backdrop. One elder said, "It's good people know our story. I just wish they would listen more and film less." Some villagers have started painting murals to reclaim the narrative. Images of ancestral heroes, cliff spirits, and scenes of daily life. It's a way of saying, this isn't just a view. It's a village, with memories, with mistakes, with heart. And yet, there's beauty in the exchange. A woman from Beijing cried after watching a child guide her goat home. A man from Guangdong brought tools to help reinforce a sagging ladder segment. A group of hikers returned a year later, not to climb, but to help build a new garden wall for an elderly couple who'd served them tea. So yes, tourism changed Atelier, but Atelier, in its quiet way, is changing the tourists too. Now imagine standing at the highest platform, watching a crowd of hikers puffing up the last few steps. Behind them, a sea of mist. Below them, the winding steel spine of the staircase. In front of them, a grandmother offering sunflower seeds with a sly grin and saying, "You made it. Now help me carry this bucket. Welcome to the village." Not a museum, a home. But for every camera pointed up the cliff, there's a quieter story behind closed doors. One the tourists don't see. It begins in those brand new polished apartment buildings 70 kilometers away, where many Atelier villagers were relocated. The tiles are clean. The elevators hum politely. The ceilings don't creak. And yet, something feels missing. This is the problem with progress. Sometimes it arrives without asking what you're willing to give up. At first, the move was exciting. The government covered relocation costs. Families were given neatly painted flats, access to electricity, running water, and hospitals that didn't require mountain climbing. Children enrolled in nearby schools. Grandparents found parks with benches and low-impact Tai Chi classes. But the silence was different. No wind humming through floorboards. No roosters crowing from rafters. No footsteps from upstairs neighbors. Just the hum of refrigerators and the buzz of fluorescent light. "I can hear my heart too loudly," one man said. A woman who had lived on the cliff for 60 years recalled standing in her tiled kitchen, staring at her electric stove, and feeling like I'd walked into someone else's dream. She missed lighting a fire, missed drying chili on the roof, missed the squeaky door hinge that sang when it was cold. And so, some quietly went back, not in defiance, not even with ceremony, just with small, tired bags and a familiar walk up 2,556 stairs. Mainstream fact: China's poverty relocation program moved millions, but retention in resettlement zones has been uneven. Many residents, especially older ones, returned to ancestral homes within months, citing cultural dislocation, lack of community, or simple homesickness. The apartment buildings were nice, but they weren't home. In a Tulare, every creaky board told a story. Every ledge was a memory. The cliff wasn't just scenery. It was family, identity, a living thing, as much a part of the villager's life as their own heartbeat. Fringe detail? One man, after moving to the new development, continued to climb back every weekend just to tend his garden. When asked why, he said, "The tomatoes here don't taste like cliff tomatoes." A tourist laughed. He didn't. Back in the city, other issues emerged. Jobs were harder to get than promised. Many villagers had only ever farmed, herded, or bartered. The modern economy expected resumes, office hours, and skill sets that didn't involve coaxing goats off ledges. Some took on low-wage work, cleaning, construction, delivery driving. Others found themselves unemployed, lost in a world that operated on schedules and screens instead of sunlight and seasons. And there were cultural gaps. Neighbors in the new buildings often came from different counties, even different ethnic backgrounds. They didn't understand Yai customs, why a family might burn pine twigs in the evening or sing to their chili plants. One woman was asked to stop hanging clothes from her balcony because it looked messy. She'd been doing it that way for 70 years. Even children struggled. In town, their cliff-earned strength and discipline meant little. They were shy, unsure of technology. Some were bullied for their accent or clothes. One boy stopped speaking in school altogether. His parents moved him back to Atulur after a year. Within weeks, he was climbing trees again, talking non-stop, and naming clouds. Scientists still argue over how to balance development with cultural preservation. Should we prioritize comfort or continuity? Is it better to modernize traditions or protect them intact? The debate rages in academic circles. But in Itularer, the answer comes quietly. From feet tracing familiar paths, from hands that still know how to knot rope, from homes that creak a little louder now, almost in relief. Not everyone returned. Some families have stayed in the resettlement buildings and adapted well. Their kids are thriving in school. They've found community. Some even returned to Atularum to visit on holidays, walking the steel stairs like tourists with insider knowledge. They bring fruit, shoes, USB cables, then sit by old fire pits and listen to stories that somehow still match the rhythm of the wind. And that's the thing. The move didn't erase Atulair. It stretched it. Now, the village exists in two worlds. One modern, tiled and wired for Wi-Fi. The other, vertical and ancient, lit by firelight and goat size. Some families choose one. Others move between them. A few have even turned it into a seasonal migration. Cliff in the summer, city in the winter. But through it all, Atulair has remained stubbornly, gloriously itself. Not because of buildings or ladders, but because of the people who remember which way the wind leans in October, who still whistle to check for fog, who still tie knots with stories woven in. So next time you hear someone say they should just move, remember this. It's easy to leave a place. Much harder to leave a life. Let's pause the footsteps, set down the baskets, and zoom out. Not from the cliff, but from time. Because every ledge in Atulair holds more than plants and people. It holds ideas about home, survival, dignity, and what we call progress. And if you listen closely, there's another kind of echo bouncing off those sandstone walls. Expert opinions. You knew this was coming. Atulair has become a magnet for geographers, architects, anthropologists, economists, and a few adventure vloggers who accidentally think they're sociologists. And like any good academic potluck, the main dish is debate. Let's start with the architects. Some praise Atulair as a brilliant example of vernacular architecture. Structures built from local materials, perfectly adapted to harsh environments without blueprints or building codes. They marvel at the cantilevered beams, the wind-resistant shapes, the way each home negotiates with the cliff instead of bulldozing it. One professor even called the houses a living conversation between gravity and courage. Others, less poetic, describe the buildings as precarious wooden cubes glued to a cliff and argue they should be retired before they become archaeological sites with people still inside. Then you've got the urban planners. They point to the success of the steel ladder and suggest replicating that kind of minimal impact infrastructure in other remote regions. It's cheaper than roads, they say, and less disruptive than relocation. Some are even proposing hybrid models, part village, part hostel, part cultural heritage site, a kind of cliffside co-op, if you will. Meanwhile, cultural anthropologists are frowning. They're worried about commodification, about Atulair being turned into a living museum where villagers perform tradition for tourists, slowly eroding the authenticity of their way of life. When a place becomes a product, one researcher warned, its people risk becoming props. Fringe tidbits? There was once a proposal, seriously, to film a reality TV show in Atulair. Something about pitting influencers against cliff dwellers in survival challenges. It was politely declined, but the fact that someone pitched it speaks volumes about how the outside world now sees this place. Dramatic, aesthetic, and somehow for sale. And the villagers? They've got their own thoughts. Some are proud. They see their village on screens and in books and feel a swelling pride. Others are wary. Too many opinions, one elder said. Not enough ladders carried. Which honestly might be the best academic criticism ever recorded. Scientists still argue, vigorously, about the sustainability of cliff life. Ecologists worry about erosion and land pressure. Economists debate whether tourism-based income can really replace subsistence farming. Health officials are cautious about emergency access and long-term care. But geographers are in love. They see Atulair as a case study in vertical adaptation, a perfect storm of tectonic uplift, social cohesion, and stubborn ingenuity. It's a physical geography marvel, a human geography puzzle, and, frankly, an existential crisis wrapped in chili peppers. Atulair forces questions. Where do we draw the line between dangerous and dignified? When does remote become forgotten? Is a home still a home when it can't be reached by road? And then there's the generational divide. The elders value endurance, rootedness, the sacred relationship with the land. The young are more flexible. Some dream of cities, others of TikTok, a few of becoming guides or goat vloggers. But almost all want some connection to the cliff, to the place that made their grandparents who they are. That's the thing. Identity doesn't just live in your name. It lives in your landscape, your routines, the way the wind sounds through your front door. In Atulair, culture isn't a costume. It's a shoulder ache from carrying water. It's knowing when to brace your foot before taking the next step. It's the way your grandmother braids your hair before school. Tight, purposeful, so the wind won't steal it. And that's what most outside experts forget. To them, Atulair is an equation, an anomaly, a challenge to be solved. But to those who live there, it's just Tuesday, soup to be stirred, goats to be fed, ladders to be climbed. One visiting scholar asked a local girl, "What do you want your village to become in 20 years?" She thought for a moment and replied, "Still here." That's the kind of answer that shuts everyone up. Because no matter how many metrics we analyze, or trends we chart, or plans we draft on sterile paper, the people of Atular are living something most of us only talk about: resilience without noise, survival without self-pity, heritage without hashtags. So next time someone waxes poetic about living close to the land, send them here. Tell them to carry a chicken up 2,500 steps. Tell them to farm a slope with no shade. Tell them to build a home on a place the earth is trying to forget. Then ask them what they think culture really means. Spoiler, it's probably not brunch. It's late afternoon now, and the clouds are starting to roll in again, slow and swollen, slipping between the cliffs like lazy ghosts. The light is soft, golden at the edges. Down below, the steel ladder gleams like a ribbon, its zigzag shape disappearing into shadow. Here in Atular, the future doesn't come fast. It dangles, uncertain, waiting for someone to tie the next knot. The question everyone's asking, but not always allowed, is simple. Will the next generation stay? The kids climbing those stairs today have seen both worlds. They scroll phones, but still tie up goats. They study calculus and how to pack corn evenly in a basket. They know the weight of chili peppers and the weight of expectation. And slowly, a choice is forming. Do they stay on the cliff, or do they go? For some, the answer is already written. They want cities, universities, stable Wi-Fi. They dream of jobs that don't involve balancing chickens. One teenage boy admitted he wanted to work in a skyscraper just to see what it's like to look down on something for once. Fair, but others hesitate. Because leaving isn't simple. It's not just a change in scenery, it's a change in rhythm, a change in soul. Many of the younger villagers walk between both lives now. They help with harvests in the summer, then return to the city for school or work. It's a kind of gentle migration, guided less by maps and more by mood. Some say they'll come back when they're older. Some already have. There are signs of quiet return. A new house built halfway up the hill. Not modern, not ancient. A teenager who left for university now teaching English classes to the village kids. A girl who studied nursing, helping elders with blood pressure checks after dinner. Mainstream geography moment. In many mountainous regions of China, a pattern has emerged called pendulum migration, a back-and-forth lifestyle where residents live part-time in modern cities and part-time in ancestral homes. It's seen not just in Sichuan, but in Guangxi, Yunnan, even Tibet. And Atular fits that pattern perfectly. The village isn't shrinking, it's stretching. Its roots are climbing in two directions at once. Fringe tidbit: one boy who moved away painted a mural of the Atulara cliff on his dorm wall. Every time he feels homesick, he taps a small dot at the top, the spot where his grandmother's house used to be. It's become a ritual. His friends call it the tap to home. But will there come a time when the ropes rot completely? When no one returns? Maybe. Villages fade. Traditions evolve. That's how time works. Even cliffs crumble eventually. But Atular isn't going quietly. Tourism, for better or worse, has given the village a new kind of visibility. Cultural projects are underway to document Yi stories, rituals, and architecture. A few digital archives are being built. Oral histories, songs, even video tours narrated by locals. And within the village, there's new energy. Not flashy, not forced, just present. Younger villagers have begun adding solar panels to rooftops, Wi-Fi routers too. Some homes now have electric rice cookers next to the old charcoal stoves. A boy live-streamed the corn harvest last year. The comments included heart emojis, cooking tips, and one confused viewer who asked, "Is this a simulation?" Nope, just gravity-defying agriculture in action. Scientists still argue whether this blend of old and new can last. Will modernization eventually erase the need to live on cliffs? Will tourism lose interest once the novelty fades? Will the steel ladder rust into silence? But Atulayuri's residents don't think in timelines. They think in weather, in stories, in the sound of footsteps on wooden floors. They'll stay as long as the mountain lets them. And when, or if, the day comes that the cliff finally falls quiet, it won't be because people gave up. It'll be because they knew when to leave gently, like guests who loved the party but didn't want to overstay. Until then, the rope will hold. The steps will echo. The village will breathe. And the future? It will dangle like a basket on a pulley, swaying slightly in the wind, waiting for the next brave hand to pull it upward. And now, the sky begins to change. Not with thunder or drama, just a soft folding of light, like dusk slowly pulling a blanket over the village. The wind settles into its nighttime rhythm, brushing against wooden beams, rattling drying herbs, stirring the corn silk like whispers. Atulayir at dusk is quieter than silence. The goats have stopped complaining. The chickens have tucked themselves into crevices. Even the steel ladder, so loud with climbers by day, now rests in metallic hush, reflecting the last threads of golden blue. Inside the homes, evening routines hum to life. Fires are lit, rice steams, a kettle whistles. Children gather around bowls of soup. Elders hum songs that don't need words anymore, melodies that have softened over generations, worn smooth like handrails polished by climbing hands. One house has a radio playing static-filled music from a station no one can quite identify. Another has an open window, just wide enough for the smell of garlic and boiled greens to wander into the dark. A grandmother spoons broth into a toddler's mouth while telling a story about a fox who outsmarted the mountain spirits with nothing but a mirror and a lie. It's not loud. It's not eventful, but it is full. Every sound, every scent, every slow step is part of a rhythm that's been beating against this rock face for centuries. A rhythm shaped by hardship, yes, but also by joy, by meals shared, by stories repeated until they became truths, by ropes tied, unknotted, and retied stronger. Now let's return, just for a moment, to the edge. The cliff no longer looks threatening. It looks still. You can see the faint shapes of homes above you, the glimmer of firelight behind slatted shutters, the dull clang of a ladle against a clay pot. You can hear someone laughing, deep and slow, at a joke you've already forgotten. And there it is, Atulayur, in its quietest form. No drama, no headlines, no tourists. Right now, just life. Dangling gently from the side of a mountain, people often imagine resilience as strength, as boldness. But here, it's gentleness, flexibility, the daily, determined choice to stay balanced in a world that's always shifting. Not many people could live here. Fewer still would choose to. But those who do, they know something. They know the difference between high and higher, between being above the world and a part of it. Between living with nature and daring it to catch you. And if the day ever comes when the cliff grows quiet for good, the mountain will still remember. The wind will still carry the songs, and somewhere a steel ladder will rust peacefully into the rock, like a final sigh of effort well spent. Now, one last time, close your eyes and picture it. A wooden home clinging to stone, a basket swaying in the air, the stars overhead, unbothered, enormous, and the heartbeat of a village, steady as rope, pulsing through the cliff. Let's take one final breath together, now that our journey has settled. You've climbed a mountain tonight, not just in distance, but in time. Step by quiet step, you explored a village that never asked for fame, only balance. A place where roofs touch clouds and homes lean into gravity like old friends. Breathe in that air again, cool, still, scented faintly with wood smoke and dusted cornmeal. Listen for the creak of floorboards that have heard 1,000 footsteps. Hear the wind nudge the shutters, whispering nothing urgent, just presence. There are no more tourists now, no ladders to climb, only soft voices behind walls of cedar and stone. Only kettles steaming and children dozing under wool blankets, stitched with symbols their grandparents could still explain in their sleep. You don't have to hold on anymore. The cliff is steady, and in this gentle stillness, you realize Atulir was never just a village on a mountain. It was a reminder that the world doesn't need to be flat to feel like home. That quiet resistance can shape an entire way of life. That balance is something you live, not something you find. So rest now. Let the edge drift behind you. Let the ropes fall slack. Let your breath settle with the stars. And sleep, knowing the village will be here, swaying gently in the dark, alive, breathing, waiting.